Hello, class. Thank you for listening in while I am out on retreat. I made this video for you guys today. Sorry to have to introduce Chapter 7 this way via a YouTube video, but we'll talk a lot about Greece over the next 2 weeks. All right. For homework tonight, you have Chapter 7, Section 1, the key terms assignment. Please read Section 1 of the iBook. Don't just look up the terms and call it a night, submit your homework. Make sure you read the section, write out in a complete sentence, definition for each term, and then submit it back into Schoology by the end of class tomorrow. All right? Submit the assignment right after you do it so you don't forget, so that way you don't have to worry about it. You'll have some time in class to get started on the homework and do that as well. All right. Hopefully all of you downloaded the Chapter 7 notes by now. I know there's a lot of slides. It probably took a while for some of you to download. If you didn't download it, then don't worry about it. You can always go back and watch this video. It's in Schoology. You can always go back and reference this at any point later tonight, this afternoon, or the next day, and so forth. All right? So for those that do have the notes downloaded and are ready, please take them out. We are going to start Chapter 7 today, Ancient Greece. All right, Chapter 7, Ancient Greece. Now, I have a few questions for you guys to just think about. You obviously can't answer them, and we can't really have a discussion about that. But for those that appreciate the skill of athletes in the Olympics and admire athletes that go on to compete in the Olympics, you have ancient Greece to thank for the Olympic Games that we have every 2 and every 4 years. If you enjoy going to plays, now unfortunately we haven't been able to go on to see Broadway plays, but if you're someone that appreciates theater, you have the Greeks to thank for that influence in our society. And if you appreciate the fact that you live in a country where you can say what you please about any subject at all, you have the Greeks to thank for that. They are the ones that kind of introduce the idea of a democracy. And a lot of aspects of our life, such as the Olympics, theater, and democracy, had their beginnings in ancient Greece. And the Greeks, as we learned, are going to be a very influential civilization, not just to Europe, but their culture is also going to spread to parts of Asia, regions that we talked about in trimester 1, parts of Mesopotamia. They're going to also have influence in Egyptian culture. We talked about Egypt back in trimester 1 as well. And the Greek culture is going to influence those regions as well, and we're going to talk about that at the end of this chapter. But before we get into all of those cultural aspects of Greece that have influenced our world today, we're going to talk about early Greece and how the Greek civilizations really started out. And you can see here in this picture of the Acropolis. This is the Acropolis of Athens. Maybe some of you have visited this Acropolis. It's one of the most magnificent sites of ancient history, and it shows the magnificent architecture the Greeks built thousands of years ago with hand tools and pulley systems and sleds. And a lot of their architectural styles have given influence to architecture here in the United States. If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., right, the Lincoln Memorial, the Capitol Building, and many other structures have Greek architectural influence. All right, we'll talk about that later on in this chapter too. So, Section 1, Early Greece. 2 early civilizations we're going to cover in Section 1 is the Mycenaean civilization, which was a very powerful Greek civilization from the year 1600 to around 1100 BC. And then the Minoan civilization, which is considered to be the oldest civilization in this region known as Greece, which goes back to around 2800 BC, and they lasted to 1600 BC. So these are the 2 civilizations we'll cover in Section 1 that kind of give rise to the Greeks that we're most familiar with. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the geography of this civilization. Now, mainland Greece is a cluster of peninsulas. Okay, and I say a cluster of peninsulas because it's several peninsulas put together that kind of separated the Greek city-states and the Greek communities. Now, what you do need to know on this slide is what a peninsula is. A peninsula is a mass of land that projects out and is surrounded by water on three sides. So you can see Sparta is on a peninsula, Athens is on a peninsula, there's all these small other peninsulas, and then Greece itself is one large peninsula. And surrounding this peninsula is hundreds of islands, and on those islands were some Greek city-states. We're not going to talk about all the Greek city-states on those islands, right? But they were all united, even though mountains and seas divided these communities from one another, which caused them to have their differences. And historians estimate that no more than a few million people lived in ancient Greece at any given time. There was a lack of living space because this peninsula was also very mountainous, so there was not too much farmland. There was not a lot of natural resources for the Greeks to live off of, which is why they relied on the sea and were very big in trading and also in colonizing. All right, some Greek city-states went out and colonized areas throughout the Mediterranean world, so that way they had more farmland and had access to more resources to allow their community to grow and to prosper. Now, the early Greek communities grew up very fiercely independent because they were divided. And just two examples that we'll talk about, Athens and Sparta are two examples of city-states that shared similar cultures, but their forms of government and their political views were very different, and even some of the privileges that they gave people of their city-state were very different, and we're going to cover that later on in this chapter. All right, I'll keep this slide up for a second so you guys can finish copying this down. Make sure you highlight what I highlighted. I know it might be difficult for you guys to see. The highlighting doesn't really show up very well with the background of these slides that I have. And we will review some of this information tomorrow in class. So this is the geography of Greece. Tomorrow you're going to also, as I do now, complete a map of Greece and have to know where some of the city-states are and know the names of different peninsulas that make up the mainland Greece and the names of some islands that we're going to talk about over the next 2 weeks. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide and introduce the first civilization I mentioned of early Greece, and that was Minoans. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have heard about the Minoan civilization. The first person to really carry out extensive excavations and archaeological sites to find out about this early society on the island of Crete was an British archaeologist by the name of Sir Arthur Evans. And he's the one that actually names this society after a mythological king, King Minos. And if any of you are familiar with Greek mythology, King Minos was the legendary king that supposedly lived in a palace where there was a minotaur. A minotaur is like a mythological figure from Greek literature. You know, that aspect of Greek literature comes from this civilization. So the Minoans, this civilization first appeared on the island of Crete around 2200 BC. Now, we don't really know how exactly they got to Crete. We actually haven't even been able to decipher the Minoans' system of writing. Okay, it's not the Greek language that is there today. Ancient Greek language is also very different from the modern Greek language that is used today. For any of you that are Greek, maybe know that. But what we do know about the Minoans from other historical writings is that the Minoans were very successful traders. Um, they developed a pretty advanced system of agriculture in which they relied on the production of two crops. All right, and those two crops were olives and grapes. And from these two crops, the Greeks are going to be able, not the Greeks, the Minoans are going to be able to grow a surplus of food, which is going to allow them to trade with other civilizations, such as the Egyptians, which are in the Nile Valley around this time, 2200 BC, and the Phoenicians and other civilizations of the Mediterranean. Now, some items that the Minoans imported from the other civilizations that they traded with were Egyptian gold, Persian tin, Syrian ivory, and the Minoans would import these materials and goods on ships that were drawn through the sea by as many as 30 oarsmen. And by 2000 BC, the Minoans were sailing on ships featuring several masts that bared great squarish type sails that the Mycenaeans and other Greek civilizations will eventually adopt. But since these seafaring people not only traded, they fished the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, as I indicated in the notes here. And the world created by the Minoans was generally a peaceful one. Right? They were very far removed from interference by outside invaders since they developed on a remote island. The Minoans did not build large walls around their cities like the Sumerian city-states did, because they needed the protection. And as skilled sailors, the Minoans possibly developed the very first navy in history. That is something you guys will need to know. All right, and this force protected the Minoan islanders from any pirates and potential invaders that there may be. Now, as you see in the picture here, I'll talk a little bit about this more tomorrow, but this picture is related to a Greek legend of a Greek god. I'm pretty sure it's a Greek god taking on the Minotaur from the island of Crete. Okay, I'll give you guys another second or two to copy this stuff down. Then we'll cover one more slide today on the Minoans. It's really just a map, just so you can see where the Minoans are. All right, and then we'll stop here. We'll talk much more about the Minoans tomorrow. I'd like to talk to you guys more about the Minoans and the early Greeks in person. Being that we were remote last week, this is a chapter I would love to be in class so I can listen to the questions that you guys may have. All right, so if you have questions on any of the slides we covered, feel free to ask them when we start the notes in class tomorrow. Make sure you get the homework done after this last slide as well with the time you have remaining. All right, now moving on. So as you see on the map here, the Minoans developed on the island of Crete, which is a large island just south of the Greek peninsula. And these little yellow horseshoe-looking icons, those are settlements that belong to the Minoans, and archaeologists have basically found artifacts and writings that date back to ancient times, to times when the Minoans lived on the island. All right, this island today is part of the Greek, to the country Greece. The other civilization we'll talk about, the Mycenaean civilization, you'll see here just north of the island of Crete, and the Mycenaean civilization will be the next civilization that comes about in Greece after the Minoans. All right, so I'm going to stop here for today. Make sure you get your homework done with the time you have remaining and submit it back into Schoology when you're done. I will see you guys tomorrow. Maybe I'll catch some of you guys at the end of the day while you're going out to your bus when I'm making my way back from retreat. Thank you everybody for listening in. If you missed any of the notes, or you would like to just listen to something that I said, again, you can watch the video at any point today. All right, have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your classes. Bye, everybody.